Hello and welcome to the Mindset Michelle TV show. We're so super excited for you to be joining us for yet another show. And today's incredible guest, it's such an absolute honor to have him on the show. And he will be known to many of you and known when you go, oh yes, I remember him from this, to others of you as well. But please let us welcome Allan Sparks to the show today. Hello, Allan.
Good morning, Michelle. How are you? So good to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation to be in your program.
Oh, it's absolutely fabulous to have you here, Allan, and for those on the different zones, good evening and afternoon and good night. So it's always wonderful to do this with people on different time zones. So for those of you that aren't aware of Allan, he is actually one of Australia's most highly decorated people in the country, with awards that I will let Allan share with you, because he can give a bit more description of the background. But the Cross of Valour is one of those, and that is one of the highest awards here in Australia. He's also done a lot of work, and this is where the awards come from, having been in the police force for over 20 years. But I will definitely not do it justice. So Allan, please share with people what it is that you've done in your background and how you came to be doing all of these incredible works of service and supporting people.
Thanks so much, Michelle. It is a great honour to have the awards that I have. And as you mentioned, I have the Cross of Valour. It's Australia's highest bravery award and highest civil award. There's only been 5 of these awards made in the past 47 years, so it's pretty rare. And for most Australians, they don't actually know about it. So it's an award that I carry with a great deal of pride, because of the circumstances of how I came to get it, and the men that I work with to save a little boy's life. I also have an award called the Medal of the Order of Australia for services to mental health in the community, and some other bravery awards, and 1 or 2 medals which are pretty rare. The Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal, and this year, not only having the honour to attend the Queen's funeral, but I've also been awarded the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Medal. And again, these are rare awards for Australians. There are only 10 of these given to Australia. Myself, the Cross of Valour recipients, the Victoria Cross recipients, and the George Cross recipient are the only Australians to be presented with these medals. So yeah, they're pretty special, and each of them unique in their own way, and each of them tells a story. But it's great to have them, and I cherish them. As you mentioned, I was a police officer for 20 years, operational police officer, a detective for most of that time, and sadly, I lost my career due to mental illness. I developed post-traumatic stress disorder, chronic depression, became suicidal, and just through one of those sliding door moments, I was fortunate enough not to end my life. And through the incredible support of my wife and my family, my girls, and psychiatric intervention, I was able to go through the recovery process, which I have learned so much. And I guess that led me into the mental health sector, where I've been actively engaged for the last 10 or so years. I became involved with Beyond Blue as an ambassador for Soldier On. I became a Deputy Commissioner at the Mental Health Commission of New South Wales, became heavily involved with the New South Wales Police Forces and other law enforcement agencies around Australia, sharing my knowledge that I've gained over these years about why I became so unwell mentally. And apart from the critical incidences I was involved in, which I guess allowed the diagnosis of PTSD, it's what I've learned about the lead up to those critical incidents that I realise now that my suit of armour that I had always had on had actually been peeled away through being chronically stressed, and I was extremely vulnerable to these incidents. So I now spend my time educating people, not only first responders, but everybody, about what we see as the main causes of burnout, and how we can reduce burnout, how we can reduce the severity of it, or how we can actually help people recover from burnout through educating them and giving them the knowledge that they need to care for themselves. So it's an area I'm extremely passionate about, because I do not want anyone to ever be where I got to. I know that those who have lost their lives through suicide my heart goes out to them and their families. I understand in many ways how they got to be there and what it's like to be there, and it is absolutely horrible. So I'm passionate about trying to help them, and it gives me some sense of understanding, and it gives me certainly acceptance about what happened to me, and I have lost almost if not all, the terrible feelings about how things used to be.
Wonderful. And what a gift for us, Allan. What an absolute gift for us that you were able to work through the PTSD and those feelings and to come out the other side. Such an inspirational icon, because I do think of you now as an icon to people about going through those dark times, but that you can come out the other side, and then dedicating your life and your work and being passionate like you have to helping others. I usually say this to people in the military, but I want to say it to you. Thank you so much for your service. Thank you for doing what you do. It is so needed in the world, and it is so needed in those services that you talk about with police and first responders. It is so needed for those people in that work field who do have a lot of PTSD because of the constant pressures and stresses they're under. So thank you, Allan, so much for all of your work.
I appreciate it, Michelle, very, very much. Thank you.
It also means that, given that on this show we talk to a lot of business and other people from different fields of life, you may have a different view then again on what success means to you. What does success nowadays mean to you, Allan?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, Michelle, and I'm quite sure that every person you ask will give an answer that may be different to others, or slightly different, or varied in some way. I look at my life and I say, what is my greatest achievement? What is it that I really want to achieve as much as possible? And for me, it's contentment. When I am content with my life, I realise that the things I do to keep myself physically and psychologically healthy are working. And for me, it's the peace and the contentment that I can look forward to the future, I can enjoy the day, and I can reflect on the past with positivity as opposed to negativity. So in a word, I would say contentment.
What a beautiful word, and I really like that. It's not that that striving for something different or needing to change or improve, or all of that kind of elements. I love that, being physically and psychologically healthy so that you can enjoy the day, enjoy the moment, enjoy where you were at, and not to be looking at what happened yesterday or in the past or anything, but to keep in that current space of what is it that makes me physically and psychologically content, and to keep doing more of that. That's a beautiful definition of success, and a lovely way of also segueing into, for the people on the show, can you share, Allan, what are some of the things that you do, especially around creating that mindset for success? And success meaning, that mindset for what do I do each day or each week to keep that contentment? How do you keep programming, in a sense, those habits and those behaviours to keep that contentment?
First and foremost, for me, I need, and I know I need, and I know why I need it. For me, quality of sleep is absolutely number one for me, for my physical and psychological health. And obviously we don't have the time today to dive deep into those reasons why, but getting quality sleep is critically important. My nutrition levels, I'm pre-diabetic, so my dad was, my mum is type 2 diabetic. And I realised that I'm at risk of developing type 2, so what I eat is important to me. And again, not going down a rabbit hole, but now the science is showing just how much influence our stress hormones have on the development of diabetes. So I try and reduce processed carbohydrate. I try and keep my life as calm as possible, so I don't have excess cortisol, and my body's not inflamed. So nutrition is important. I do a lot of moving. I have in the past trained physically very, very hard for professional and personal reasons, but now it's important that I understand movement. So it's a matter of walking good distances each day, and then building on that when I feel like it or where I'm up to it. Not having too much alcohol, not like I used to as a cop. And when I do have stressful moments, and we all have them, I've learned so much about the benefits of diaphragmatic breathing, and that's my sort of go-to immediate. Okay, things are really starting to get out of control here. Just spending time to breathe diaphragmatically, to calm it down, to shut off that fight or flight response, and get my body back in balance. So all these things I find work in harmony, and I call them my building blocks. And I know when my building blocks are starting to, crumble a bit. So therefore I can focus on what needs to be rebuilt, reset, to keep my foundations of life solid above those building blocks, my foundations. So they're the things that I focus on. I guess I have a pretty good understanding of the impact of trauma upon me. And we all face stresses in life, as I said, and trauma at times. So it's understanding how to manage those and understand them and box them if need be, and how to address them in a way that doesn't prolong the trauma and or stress. So again, it just comes from the knowledge I've gained over the years working in the sector, working with some brilliant psychiatrists and psychologists who've educated me, and my own research, and putting that against my life where it was, as to now how I know I need to live my life in a very, very positive and rewarding way.
Wow, so much information there to take in, and I love how you describe it as the building blocks. So you've identified different areas for you that are like the foundation. I think of health and mental health especially as like you're building a house, and what you're describing so beautifully there is the foundations of that house. The getting the sleep, understanding nutrition, understanding movement, lowering stress as much as possible, and recognizing that everybody has some form of trauma throughout the day, throughout the week, where you can be challenged in some way with, a shock because you go to step out on the road and the car goes by very closely, all of these different life events, and managing that trauma and the ways of recognizing what elements of that foundation might be a bit wobbly throughout the day or throughout the week. I really love your insights into how you keep being aware of those elements for yourself and how you keep building them. And the diabetes one is a really interesting one, because I think you very much touched on it, and we mentioned it a little bit before the show, about prevention rather than dealing with something when it gets to the other side. I know for myself, movement's very important. Similarly, my family have got a history of adult diabetes, so it can be triggered with trauma, with mental health issues and physical health issues. So like yourself, it's that, what prevention do I do in my life, and what do I move around in terms of the foundation of my mental and physical health to make sure that I'm tracking it and I'm managing it. And these are all really, really good tools. What would you say then that, say that you're aware of these foundational elements of building blocks being a little bit more challenged, and you're managing it, but you can notice that it's kind of compounding. So what sort of suggestions do you have again where perhaps, even though you're aware and you're managing it, the volume, and I think that this is part of what people are feeling a lot at the moment with the things happening in the world. They're feeling like there's just too many, and then, you know, it's all kind of compounding. So what sorts of things do you do if you notice for yourself that, you know, instead of 2 or 3 bits being a little bit rocky of those building blocks, you know, maybe 4 or 5 of them, and they've been a bit rocky for a couple of days, what sorts of things do you then do to support yourself to focus on each of those building blocks and bring them back into more stability?
I think then you have to be very strategic about your plans as to, and forgive me, I don't particularly like the word resilience. I think it's used in the wrong context in society today. My go-to word is endurance. How do I endure a period of crisis? And for me, I then dissect my building blocks, and I might park some aside and focus on the ones that I really know are important. For me, those two are my sleep quality, and the other is what we call the HPA axis. So it's a fight or flight response, but it's far more detailed than just that. And I know that the impact of a dysfunctional HPA axis is so damaging to my physical and psychological health. I need to maintain that so that when my brain is telling me that I need to respond to a fear, my body is in balance, ready to act immediately, and it's not dysfunctional. So I then shift to, okay, number 1, sleep. And then 2, maintaining my HPA axis so it's ready to respond in the way our bodies have developed over tens of thousands of years to respond to fear. So then I know if I've got those 2 rock solid, I will be able to endure, because what we've identified over the years is what we say sleep deprivation and dysfunctional HPA axis are 2 of the greatest causes of chronic stress/burnout. So if we can rebuild those or maintain those at really high levels, we then put ourselves with a nice suit of armour around us. And then we can add our weapons, so to speak, to combat the trauma, the burnout that we are experiencing in that part of our life. So then it's just, okay, parking out those others, but focusing on the main 2. And I know that if I can do those really, really well, then I'm able to endure a lot of things that have happened and I know are likely to happen in the future.
I really like how clearly you've, Lynn, explained, well, with these building blocks and looking at the endurance around the different building blocks, for you and what you've identified is that the sleep and the HPA axis are the 2 key ones for the stability amongst the rest of them. This HPA axis, in the little bit of neuroscience that I've understood, it's fascinating because even things like, and you would know more of this as a first responder, that, you know, when you walk into a new room, that part of your brain is already going back to the reptilian part of searching out for danger, even unconsciously. So when many people going between rooms in the house and walk into the kitchen and go, what did I come in here for? Part of it has been that reptilian part of the brain clearing everything else so that your brain is fresh for any new dangers. Now, as a first responder and having gone through what you've gone through, I'm sure you have a much deeper understanding of those types of things where your brain is, evolved over many, many years to keep you physically safe and to react and respond. And the brain today is only aware of a small part of all of that. So I love how you've described this HPA axis and being aware of that fight or flight response as an important part of keeping your adrenaline and your cortisol and all of those stress hormones and factors that get released into the body, keeping those on more of an even keel.
And the lovely part is, Michelle, is that as I said, that the diaphragmatic breathing is such a wonderful tool to have to restock your HPA axis stress hormones and chemicals. And there's other things like again, your sleep quality, what you're eating, reducing alcohol or eliminating alcohol, and all these things. And I think that we as human beings have the ability to be very flexible. We need to be disciplined, but we have the ability to be very flexible. So there comes times where we are experiencing extreme stress. We need to be smart and go, you know what, as much as I want that drink, as much as I think I need that drink, it's probably the worst thing I can ever do. And our caffeine intake and all these things, there comes a time where we just have to wind back and focus on what we know will help us endure the period of crisis. Then we can go back to our normal life, so to speak. But it's time to be really smart about what we do. And what I see in today's society, and we know statistically that Australians have the highest rate of burnout in the Western world. Statistically, 4 out of 5 Australian workers are burning out. So for me, that's quite terrifying. And I go, well, how do we prevent this? How do we reduce this? And it all gets back to education, and that's sharing our knowledge to help people not get to these places that they feel they can't cope. Because once you've had those feelings, the senses of hopelessness and worthlessness, that's when it can get out of control extremely quickly. And one thing I've found in my time with the mental health sector is something created by the Mental Health Commission of Canada. It's called the Mental Health Continuum, where it divides your state of psychological health basically into 4 colours. And I love this continuum. I think it's one of the greatest tools ever to allow people to speak up about where they are, or for others to engage with people when they're concerned about the changes that they see in that person, whether it be a co-worker, a family friend, a partner, whatever. So you can just go to people and say, look, I'm really concerned about you. I think I can see these aspects in this colour, and I don't think that's very good. So how do we get you back to the green, which is the good zone? So it's those things of understanding the why factor and what we can do about it individually, as a group, collectively, as an organisation, whatever, to allow people to have that suit of armour on as much as they can to face the stresses that everyday life seems to be adding to day after day after day. And if we don't do that, we will forever be having this reactive response to mental ill health. And we'll never, ever meet the demands if we don't intervene, prevent it, or reduce it. So it's about a proactive approach as opposed to a complete focus on a reactive approach. And that's what I bang on about basically, is being proactive, not so much reactive.
And I think that you raised some really, really incredible and important points there. So thank you for sharing about the mental health continuum from Canada. I'm sure many people will be able to have a look at that and then use that continuum and integrate it into their lives and into perhaps their workforce as well, because I think that that's a fabulous way of checking in with other people and checking in with yourself. Mm. And I also appreciate that one of those things that I love about these sorts of measurements or continuums is that you can start to see, like we were talking about earlier, when the building blocks, when they start to get a bit wobbly, you can start to see, well, actually, you know, I was green before, but now I'm heading into amber over the last few days. So what steps do I need to take to move back to green? And doing that prevention at that early stages, as opposed to, well, I'm red and I'm going into, you know, the burnt red colour. Yeah. And now I'm in a much more heightened state of stress and anxiety and overwhelm. And it is interesting how stressed Australians are. And I think, you know, the culturally, with the alcohol being a big part of the culture and many other facets, mean that in Australia, celebrating prevention and celebrating ways of taking control of your life and your mental health and your physical health You know, we don't really have as much of that sort of celebration, which would help with these types of things. There's more of the focus, especially in media, on drama and things that will create more sales. And so that commercialism and the culture means that creating drama, creating hype and hysteria is much more prevalent. And it means that when you turn on media, news, whatever, it's kind of, you're bombarded with that level of stress from what you're hearing and observing day in, day out. So I know that you would say that also one of the things to do is to switch off all of your social media and different accounts to again take a step back from that level of drama that in everyday life you can start to get so caught up in it that it just adds to your drama, becomes part of what drama is happening on the screens in front of you, and it just adds and adds and adds to all of that stress levels that you're experiencing in your world each day. But I love this, you know, in everyday life becoming more responsive rather than reactive. And the diaphragmatic breathing is definitely one of those things. Do you have specific, like with meditation or different ways of doing the breathing, do you have different tools or things that you recommend to people to learn how to practice that?
Look, it's so, I mean, we breathe. So it's just, how to say, expanding the knowledge of how to breathe. So the way I describe it is we breathe into our belly, and you can do it in many, many ways, but the way I do it, I imagine I'm breathing in to fill up my belly, and I'll breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, and then in for 4. So it's just a cycle. And I can be, when I'm actually not moving as far as my walking, when I'm actually starting to exercise, to train, to increase my fitness levels, I'll actually be breathing diaphragmatically while I'm training. Interestingly, a lot of special forces combat soldiers are trained to breathe diaphragmatically pre, during, and post combat. So it's like anything. The more you practice it, the more you use it, the more efficient it becomes, the more effective it becomes, and it just becomes part of nature. So it's and obviously you can Google diaphragmatic breathing and learn it very, very quickly. But for all of your viewers who are watching your wonderful program, who do yoga and like exercises, I'm quite sure that they understand how euphoric they feel after a great session. Because for me, when I've done yoga and I analyse it with my wrist-worn device, I realise I'm getting a great cardio work. But also I understood that for most of that yoga session, I'm actually breathing diaphragmatically. So the benefits it's giving me are just phenomenal. So I walk out of a yoga session going, yes, I feel fantastic. If I'm sitting in the car driving around, I'm breathing diaphragmatically. I'm coming up to a red light, I go, it's a red light. Here's a chance to do some diaphragmatic breathing while you're sitting here. So you can do it anytime you're awake, you can do it. And it's one of those things that the more you do it, it just becomes second nature. But the science of diaphragmatic breathing and the impact it has on your HPA axis, I really urge everyone watching today to jump on and Google it, and you go, oh my God, I didn't realise that. Wow. And it's this real light bulb moment that when I first learned about HPA axis, it's like, now I get it. And I realised that for me in my past, I was so chronically stressed. I was completely done, burnt out. And my HPA axis was shot. Everything was working against me. And then these terrible incidents happened that left me so destroyed. And I see today, Michelle, that our society is full of fear. And you identified that the way our media networks try and create clickbait to attract our attention, it creates drama. It causes us to feel fear. And the amount of fear that we are experiencing as humans today is way different to what I felt as a young person, way different to what my parents felt, their grandparents. Our world is so different. So we need to learn how to adapt to our current life. And one of those ways is understanding how our body responds to fear and how we can combat that response in a way that allows us to live some degree of calmness. And I look at the pressures that people are on today, particularly the mums and dads with children who are both working, the demands upon them, the fear that they are feeling, whether they're conscious or in their subconscious of fear, it is just off the Richter scale. And these are why what I'm saying is what we're seeing. So many people are burning out because they just can't cope physically and psychologically with the demands that the world is placing upon them.
And I agree that there's so many demands, and it's such a complex area, Allan, and I wish we had many more hours to talk through your fabulous insights and examples. If people did want to get hold of you, because I know that you speak in a lot of really important events and are a fabulous keynote speaker as well. If people wanted to get hold of you, what's the best way of contacting you?
Probably two ways. There's my website. It's www.allansparks.com, or through LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I really like LinkedIn. I have it's one way for me to retain positive social connection, which is very important. So I'd say LinkedIn or through my website are the easiest ways. My email address, if I could give my email address.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, is simply Allan_Sparks CV@gmail.com. And look, I'd love to hear from people. I'd love to hear the things that you're doing to help you, which then we can share that knowledge to help others. That's what we're going to start doing. It's helping each other.
It's a beautiful sentiment, so much, Allan. And finally, one of my absolute favourite questions: if you were to give some advice to your younger self, what would that advice be?
Use sunscreen because I have too many skin cancers. But education about my future. What do I need to know about to allow me to live a long, healthy, positive life? And particularly my work environment, because what are the risks in my work environment? What do I need to know to minimise or eliminate those risks? And that gets not only to a physical sense, but a psychological sense. Now, how do I prepare myself for tomorrow? And that's what I didn't do. I didn't understand because I didn't know. We didn't have the resources back then that we have now. So it's obtaining as much knowledge as you can about the risk you may face and how to combat those to prepare yourself.
I really love that, and it's been such an absolute pleasure hearing about the building blocks and endurance and, educating yourself so that you have the knowledge and the information to be able to deal with those day-to-day traumas and events that happen and to keep enduring. So, Allan, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege having you on the show today.
Thanks, Michelle. I've loved being here. As I said, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. It's been great. The engagement through the whole process has been wonderful, and I look forward to a very long, positive relationship with you. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Allan. You are still the most famous person I know, having gone to the Queen's funeral. And it's a bit sad because those awards that you got, the medals and everything, now are also, like you were saying, very rare. But and out of all of that, the thing people I know myself remember is he went to the funeral.
Yeah, that was one of my life's greatest honours, I can assure you.
Yeah, and perhaps another time we can do a show just on the what was it like going to the funeral and the emotions, especially as an Australian, that very, very deep change where we've all kind of grown up with that stability and how that's changed. But for another show, for another day. Okay. Thank you so much for today, Allan, and to the viewers out there. Thank you again for joining the show. I hope that you've enjoyed as much as I have hearing the insights from a very, very special man who we're very grateful did go through some of those dark times and has come through the other side to be able to share with us some deeply important insights into it. But for now, from my heart to your heart, Be great, be fabulous, and be you.